Welcome to The Art of Growth. This is Jim Zartman, and today we are, I guess in a way, wrapping up the Hunter Farmer Teamer series. We've been talking about our new book that is out now on Amazon. And if you reach out to us because you don't want to buy from them, we have a couple other options that we can offer you. Just reach out to us at theartofgrowth.org. But today we're going to share an interview that we did with the Enneagram and Marriage podcast. We are super thankful that we were invited onto some other podcasts, and we're so thankful that Krista had us on to talk about this. And this is like a nice summary conversation, and we were very thankful to have it. So we wanted to share that. If you haven't taken the new Hunter Farmer Teamer Instincts Assessment yet, you can do that at theartofgrowth.org. And that is also where you can sign up for the newly released self-paced certification program, which has a bit more one-on-one attention and will work for those of you with schedules that doesn't work for the normal times that we host those. And if you want to improve the health of your team, reach out to us about having us in to train your organization and to build your leaders and partner with you on strategic initiatives so you can get those goals across the line. So set up an appointment with us so we can discuss that. And if you aren't signed up for the newsletter yet, do that at theartofgrowth.org as well. Now let's jump into our conversation with Krista from the Enneagram and Marriage podcast.
Hello, guys. Thank you so much for joining this very special episode on the Enneagram and Marriage podcast. We're talking about the Hunters, Farmers, and Teamers, a revolutionary approach to understanding instincts. I'm joined by Jim Zartman, Type 8, Joel Hubbard, Type 7. You may know them as hosts of the successful Art of Growth podcast, and they have their own Enneagram test for youth, for businesses. They speak all over, and I am so pleased they're speaking right here with us today because their deep dive on instincts, which you know is one of our absolute favorite topics here at Enneagram and Marriage, is so helpful that I was able to use it even in my own relationships upon really reflecting and dissecting the episode. So if you're anything like me, sometimes upon your first hear of a newer concept or a newly fleshed out concept, you're like, okay, that was interesting. Let me listen again so I can apply. That's how I felt as I both read the book, which I'm holding up if you're watching on YouTube, but also just even taking in the information. So I loved getting to really process this again after the interview because I've already made a few more changes, getting me out of my top instincts. And really also, I'll share at the end today, a way that I understand myself a little bit better. And more importantly than understanding just ourselves and our authenticity, which I love, is understanding how we relate to others and get out of our own way when we get stuck. So they're going to help us with that today. I'm so thankful. Happy St. Patrick's Day if you're listening live, 2025, March 17th. Otherwise, just so thankful. Hope you're well. There's been a lot of tragedies in the world and in our country of the US, both. I hope that everyone is okay. My prayers go out to those in the fires, those who are experiencing lots of colds and flus and allergies. And I know Jim was recovering from a cold while we recorded. He did amazing, but others of you have had some very bad weather. And so again, thoughts go out to everyone. Prayers go out to everybody as we still learn together because we are surviving together. We want to thrive together. We can't do it all the time to thrive, but we can come back to it. That's the beautiful resiliency of all of us here together. We're learning. You pressed play for a reason. Let's do this. I'm so grateful you're here. Joel and Jim, I'm so happy to have you on the Enneagram and Marriage podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, we are all so passionate about today's topic. I know our listeners are geeking out because all the Enneagram info podcasters together. This is great. Tell us how you two met and began your successful pod journey together, and then your types too.
Sure. Okay. Jim's handing it over to me.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Well, prior to this, we were both in ministry, and so that's how I met Jim. Was in that world, and right about that same time, I was kind of burning out myself and had started to look at different. I was reading some mystical works and finding them to speak a bit more to me than sort of mainline, religious content, and so I started doing a bit more of that deeper inner work. And then I don't know how I ran into it. Maybe it was one of the authors referenced. And I know, so Richard Rohr is a big, like he's been hugely influential in my life and in his books. And so I think that might have been the source for me of discovering the Enneagram. And and then the podcast first one, typology or the road back to you, as it was called back then. And that one really started to speak to me. And so, I found it to be there was something about it that it felt like it was calling. Like, I think a lot of people say different things about the Enneagram, the way they felt drawn to it or it pulled at them, unlike any other system did. And that's what it felt like to me. And I think at that point, that's when I started taking it seriously. Right around 2017 is really when I had a moment of like, I think I'm made for this, and I don't know what that means. So I just sprung it on my wife in January of 2017, typical 7 style, like, hey, I think I'm supposed to get certified in this. What do you think? And she's like, sure. I think you're made for this for sure. And then in the summer, late summer, I went and again, typical 7 style. I took everything I could in it was like 4 weeks. I took every single class they offered at the narrative tradition. and then after that, we started recording some podcasts, and Jim's like, why don't we do this and see what happens? And so we did. And Jim has more of the stats on this, but it kind of exploded right around that time. So I think it was like when the Enneagram was when it was starting to cry, it was picking up, it was, it was unknown for the most part prior to that point. And then all of a sudden it just took off. And so we caught the wave right at the time where it was, so dumb luck, as we say, we're not, these brilliant planners or, it's we wish we could say we came up with this great idea and then we executed on it with this incredible plan, but that's not how it worked.
Well, you're being humble. I know you guys had a lot to do with it too, but I hear you. You're like, also this. Thank you. Oh my gosh. Okay. And Enneagram 7, it sounds like, as well.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. Well, tell us if you want to add anything to that, Jim.
Yeah, sure. So different personality modalities had always been fascinating to me. I started reading them when I was a teenager, and I had a cursory understanding for the Enneagram for a while, and we started getting into it a bit more before Joel did his certification and exploring it more. And I always joke, but it's also honest, that I come to these systems often to find out what's wrong with other people. Because I thought I was fine, but I'm just kind of like, well, how can I understand better or lead better or, kind of deal with the different personalities that are out there. And this was something that I found really confronted me. And then when I looked back through a lot of the things that had gone wrong in my life, the things where the card had got completely upset, I couldn't help but see my type in those events. And I'm an 8. So there is a lot of times where it got really confrontational, where my solution was to challenge, to push back, often when it was not necessary. And so I started to have to kind of unpack my own journey. And as we'll get into, as we talk about the instincts in the book, like true to my teamer instinct, that social instinct, whenever I'm learning anything, I always want it to be a shared experience. Like I've always said that people learn better in circles than they do in rows. So when we have a shared learning experience, we can take it so much further. And so when Joel was talking about recording panels, that really spoke to me, because we're going, well, we're not here describing the types. We're not here to be the experts. We want to invite you in and you speak for yourself and you represent what these types look like. And so when we first started launched the podcast, which was the summer of 2018, I just said, let's throw it on the internet. Maybe someone will benefit from it. And then, I think I checked it a week later, something, and like 200 some people had listened to it. But then I checked a week later, it was like 2,000. I checked the next week and it was like over 10,000. And then it started hitting like 10,000 every single week. So we were going, okay, something is going on here. I was like, Joel, we better set up a website, or because there's nothing. We literally just threw it out in the ether, not planning for it to be anything.
Yeah.
Certainly not expecting it to be what it is now, which is it is our both of our full-time jobs running this company. Um, but it started as like a passion and a deep belief for me is that it has to happen in you for it to happen through you.
Mm.
And so I think the first few years were just like letting this sink in us, letting us have the conversations, letting me confront myself, letting me disclose that to my immediate circle, and and do some of those things that an eight has to do, which is engage in that vulnerability that isn't just selective vulnerability,
Mm-hmm.
so that growth can actually start to happen. And as growth happened in the personal realm, it also started happening in all these other realms.
Mm. That's really neat and speaks to your team and social instinct as well that you brought it out. I also love how before we got on and even now you guys both brought up as we we're discussing your awesome book, which we're going to be covering today for those of you who are watching on online with YouTube. Hunters, farmers, and teamers harness human instincts to elevate impact. I love it. You guys are really showing us that you have the credibility of doing your inner work first. And we just
Mm.
sat with that tension a little bit before we got on that any of us doesn't want to produce something unless we really believe it.
Yeah.
And that is so important to hear from you guys. We're all three aggressive, assertive stance people here. And to know that I think one of the reasons you're successful is because of that integrity and depth. I think that's partly, although you also shared, Joel, the timing was perfect, but also that commitment you have to self improvement, to dig in. And I hear, of course, there was a wrestling to it because we're all going to do that dance all the time and it's going to be tough, but you're doing it. And now your listeners get to benefit. This is beautiful. We get to benefit from the book. Tell us what made you, in addition to the type panels and everything else you've been doing on the show, what made you really look at the instincts and say, this is deeper and we need to really get to this.
Yeah. It's always a tough question for me because I don't know how I come to things.
Okay.
Only in reflection I go, oh yeah, we did come to this. Like
Yeah.
it was just following the scent. And I think that's
Mm.
something that I value enormously, as as a creator is just going where the scent takes you. And doesn't mean it's going to take you anywhere either. Sometimes it's a dead end, but other times there's something there. And so the instincts became interesting to us probably right. I don't know what year it was, Jim, but we went to that Michael Naylor
That was
training.
2020. 2021 was the first season, so it would have been 2019 or
I think
2020 when we went to
19.
that.
You
Okay.
might be right. It might have been 2019 when we went there. And but I was moved by it. So again, as Jim said, what's done in you then can have some impact through you, and that was a moment for at least me. I'll speak for myself, where I was impacted by recognizing that I had been repressing my dominant instinct, my hunter instinct,
Wow.
and trying to live out of my secondary one, which is the social instinct. And so the freedom came to me in that moment of I can engage with this a little bit more now and starting to lean more actively into it. So the impact it had on me meant to me that maybe this might have some impact on others as well. But it wasn't until we did the podcast, it's 27 panels, I think we did, which nearly killed us because it was a lot of work to put panels together. I talked to 150 people in setting this up before we actually did this,
Mm.
and then we had the panel set up, and then it was amazing because they were telling us how the instincts functioned in them. And pretty soon it opened up our eyes to recognize there's something here that we never even imagined, which was that we always knew about stacking, but we had no clue that actually the significant difference was your first two and how impactful your top two were.
Yeah.
And so we would have the same dominant instinct in the same room, Zoom room, and there were two of them that were like, oh yeah, me too, yeah, 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 and then one that was like, not quite. And then we asked them, well, what's your second instinct out of curiosity? Again, following the scent. Well, what's your second? And oh, my second's this. And the other two were like, oh no, my second's that. And
Mm.
we found that to start to be consistent, where many were saying that is the distinct difference for them as well. And so that changed the whole language around subtype for us, which was really your first and your second instinct shape who you are. And even to the degree of now we realize that the second actually is very much like a resource point. And it is where you manifest your dominant instinct. That's the place it shows up. So all of this was what gave us so much interest in the instincts, is that it felt infinite in its depth. And to the degree that now we see it equal to the type. It's not a weak, like, it's not like a wing theory or it is every bit as much as important as knowing your type. So that's what kind of gave us, like, I think we need to spend more time in it, and then doing stuff in corporate too. It's like you can't use the typical psychological language of self-preservation, social, and sexual. That doesn't really work in that space. So we realized we had to do something different and use different language.
And for people catching up on the terminology, that self-preservation is what we equate to like the farmer, the sexual to the hunter, and the social to the teamer. And we use those terms because we as much as we like the developmental, the evolutionary aspect of the original terms, and I think to a certain extent they're helpful. It is hard to bring them into certain spaces, and it's hard to see what they look like when it kind of becomes the full-grown, mature version of this, when it's not the developmental stage of life, when it's like an ongoing, the way that you tend to want to operate. And so one of the things that got us really interested in this, well, I always say, like, I try to figure out what's going on with other people. Like, why are people not like me? Like, this has always been an interesting question. And then as I got into the Enneagram and realized that I was an 8, I'm like, why are these other 8s not like me?
Yes.
And I was like, the wing thing doesn't quite
cover it.
It's not enough. And I'd look at, tri-type theory or some of these other theories. And I'm just like, it's just not really nailing it. But the instincts felt like it just, bam, nailed it. Especially once we started really talking about the stack. I mean, confronted by the blind spot. And so for people who haven't taken the test, one of the things that was a huge data point for us is we did put out an assessment on this. And it's still called the instincts test, but it's the hunter farmer teamer test that's on our website. And I think it's a really good thing for people to do as a starting point, to go and take the assessment, look at their stack to say, what is my dominant, what is my secondary, and what is the blind spot, the one that is a little resisted or repressed or forgotten, or takes a little bit more effort to integrate.
Yes, I love that. And I want to ask about that too. Most of our listeners here, although I checked with, I'm sure you did the same, Spotify Wrapped, we do have a lot of new listeners. So some of these people are just hearing about instincts, which is so exciting. But most of our listeners spent an entire year with me 2 or 3 years back, going through instincts every week, because we started to realize the same thing in my sessions with couples, that it was leveraging totally different levels when we started using the instincts. And that, same as you guys discovered, instead of sometimes even type, full sessions around just instinct and full treatment plans around just instinct, because it's so deep. And I love that you're playing with the language, because I have started using the language of desire on this podcast, and that helps within the marriage framework. But you certainly don't want to use the language of desire in a workplace setting. It could be a little bit, but it's not the same. And I think that different labels are important for different moments. And I am appreciative that you guys have come up with language for us to use together as colleagues, as friends. And both of you with your social had that, as your primary and secondary. But tell us about this stacking piece again, because I think some of our listeners would like to learn that. And in fact, I do too, when you talk about first, our first dominant instinct, and then you said our second one comes through that. Can you guys explain that to us a bit more?
Sure. Yeah. And we're still developing this. So this is a conversation, which
Yeah.
I love getting the feedback on this because it helps us to get better at, what
Mhm.
it is that we're intuiting. We're
Yeah,
sensing
exactly.
something. There's something here. We're observing something. What is that thing that we're
Mhm.
seeing?
Yes.
And so the first one, your dominant instinct, will tend to show up through the secondary instinct. That tends to be how it does its work. So, for example,
Mhm.
if you are sexual first or hunter first and you are teamer or social second, your
Mhm.
sexual instinct will find that it prefers to hunt, it prefers to do new things with other people. It does not want to do that alone.
Mhm.
And it uses the social sphere as a means to making those connections, those one-to-one connections.
Wow.
So versus the self-preservation, someone might say, well, then what does it look like with self-preservation? Well, it's a very big contrast because with the self-preservation, the
Mhm.
sexual doesn't go looking in the group for that. It looks more towards resources, practical resources. So if I'm going to go hunt, if I'm going to go take on a new project, a new endeavor, I'm going to go resource myself. I'm going to research it. I'm going to lay out a plan, maybe a little bit more so.
Mhm.
And that's going to be more of the approach I take. It's still going to have, within the self-preservation, still your family, your close friends in that little circle. So it'll still rely on that, but that's where it tends to find it more comfortable in that smaller, practical circle than in the big circle, say, of the social sphere. So that's just a quick and dirty. There's a whole lot more we could say about that, but that's kind of the shorter answer on that.
Yeah. So the first two instincts, your favorite one, and then when you use secondary, are really tracking together more than I think a lot of us realize. We usually just compartmentalize. Like this is my first one, then I use
Yeah.
my next one, as though we're all in theory all the time instead of
Yeah.
practice. You guys are putting it on the ground for us. And maybe you can even give us some examples of you guys at work and your top and secondary, and then we can talk about the third one after. But we would love to hear how you've used this at work, maybe together.
Yeah. So thinking about us using it personally at work, or are you talking about like when we use it in corporate settings?
Either way, well, I meant like you two within your relationship together when you're brainstorming, how you each tend to work. It could even be a family or relationship you think of. Actually, the best analogy would be here's what I do with my wife or something. Because I know you mentioned Joel that
Yeah.
part. But either way, we would love a fleshed out example if that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for the so I'm sexual social or hunter teamer. In that stacking, I tend to not find my desire to stay within the local small circle very much. So it's like lots of independence and lots of desire to have other circles that I'm a part of. Not a ton. I'm not nearly like the dominant teamer type who would have many circles. Particularly the more gregarious types, naturally, they will have many circles.
Mhm.
But that's how it would show up. So, my wife loves her independence and I love mine, and so we're not going to. I've described the social instinct as a sort of outside the bubble kind of people. So you have those who are like inside the circle or inside the bubble, and that's more the
Mm.
self-preservation instinct. So they're going to tend to spend a lot of time with each other, spend a lot of time getting to know each other, enjoying sort of rhythms together and routines and traditions and that sort of thing. But when
Mhm.
you get outside of that, you get to more of the teamer and more of the, hunter teamer kind of pairing. The tendency is to be more outside the circle. So that's where
Mhm.
the variety or the excitement or the new or that's where that exists. And so for Jim and I, we both found that we work very independently, which has surprised some people who have come into our circles and been like, "Hey, let's work on a project together." And Jim and I are very independent, but we also
Yeah.
value co-creating things together. So and it was really Jim's. initiation of, hey, when we write this book, let's do it together. Let's meet like
Ooh.
weekly. And I loved it because that structure was very, very helpful for me to get, how do I wrangle in this creative energy to have it aimed in a direction?
Mhm.
And so that was a very collaborative experience. And we noticed that when we're doing it together, we tend to have more creativity because of the shared instincts and how they work. I need the others to help me with the hunt, and the teamer needs people in order to also feel like there's something, that's more meaningful in the experience of creating, is it's done with other people. So
Mm.
uh, yeah.
My gosh, that's
Yeah,
so
because
fascinating.
I mean, a
Yeah.
huge thing for me as a primarily a teamer instinct is I want to be a part of something bigger than myself. It has more meaning the more collaboration. So the greater the collaboration, the greater the sense of meaning. And I know people are thinking, well, this is an Enneagram and marriage thing, and we wrote a business book, and these, I don't see this as separate compartments.
No.
I think I the biggest desire I have is that people would value themselves, they would value others, and relate well. And I think that comes into every single sphere. And this is a bit of that teamer instinct talking. It's like I want
Yeah.
people to see each other, to value each other, and that includes like the most intimate relationships, but also these interdependent relationships, whether we're working or otherwise. And
Mhm.
that a lot of that does come from the teamer instinct that I think, how do we write this thing right now so that it can communicate to a lot of people? And of course, when there's a lot of establishment in the Enneagram world that like we use these kinds of terms and we talk about them these kinds of ways and these kinds of settings. And I'm like, but we're going to upset that.
Yeah.
And are we confusing people or are we adding a layer? And so all of this stuff is always going through my head.
Yeah.
But the great thing about partnership in my mind, when it's done well, which I think Joel and I do it really well, is and we're very aware of our types and everything, like ego really does get silenced in the process because the goal is the goal. And so a lot of, I think when it came close to putting out the book time, we would message each other like, I think we could cut this whole chapter. Hey, I think we should cut this whole story. I think I want to cut this whole thing you spent all day writing. And both of us are just like, cool, cut it. Cool, cut it. Like there's this there's an ease of just being like, we understand that we are going towards a shared goal.
Mm-hmm.
And when people have that in mind, whether it's in their most intimate relationships, their marriage, their parenting, their work environment, we have a shared goal, then you try to utilize every single thing that comes to the table toward that goal instead of it being any kind of a me versus you, which, you obviously you work with a lot of couples and stuff. That one of the main things that goes wrong with a couple is when it becomes me thing versus you versus instead of us versus this thing, solving this thing together.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that's kind of a roundabout way of pulling these different ideas together, and which is what I'm trying to do to say like, but that's the whole point of it, is that it comes back to that, like, well, how do we actually value and understand each other and like allow each person to bring the thing that they bring? And that teamer instinct, yes, it's outside of the bubble, but I'm also trying to get lots of bubbles to clump together so that we can all share from each other.
I love that. Thank you for just being vulnerable too in your 8, but also clarifying in your 8. And then also Joel in your 7 saying the creative ways that we began to think and kind of have to process as we went through to be as practical and real as possible. Both of you shared sometimes you have to put ego aside, our own or the egos of others, to say, if there's something we can bring to the world, that's our unique gift to bring. We're going to try to bring that as respectfully as possible. And we're even learning as we go together. So I love that. And I love that you also recognize and are naming here the need for each of these instincts, whatever we're calling them. We need them all very much in our work settings.
Yeah.
And also in our home settings. And so just also likening, yes, wherever you're relating, you guys talk about needing growth and grace. How do you do that? How do you recommend our listeners do that when they're stuck and they're just so stuck in that spot? And it's like, theoretically, I know that I need to be more social or more of a teamer, or I know that the hunt is important, but it's not me. It scares me, or I feel uncomfortable with it. How do you help people to become more expansive as they're trying to? I know you talk about it in the book, and guys, make sure you do grab this book, but we'd love to hear a bit of that here.
Yeah. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is if there's people in the self-help world tend to go digging naturally. There's a lot of types that want to go and improve themselves, and it becomes its own problem that they're overdoing it. They're over revving on trying to fix themselves. There's a problem, and I got to fix this problem. And what I encourage people to do is to allow the path, to allow reality to surface what it does, and for you to be aware that something has been surfaced. In other words, if you've had a cyclical pattern, let's say with your spouse, your partner, and it's showing up again, what are you going to do with that problem? For some, it's like that problem is in the way of the direction I'd like to head in. And there's an old saying that says that what's on the path is the path.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we want to avoid that when in fact that is the very thing, even though it seems like a distraction from what we're trying to accomplish. And so when that surfaces, it undoubtedly will reflect your type, how you respond to this situation, not the situation, but how you respond to it will reflect your type and your instinct and your instinctual stacking. It'll reflect how you want to go about dealing with that problem. Because when we're confronted with a challenge, the survival brain takes over. And that survival brain, not the thriving brain, there's a big difference, and even in how the instinct shows up. Because the instincts, from a really primitive standpoint, it's just designed to protect you. That's it. It has no concern for much of anything else other than, protect the self, psychologically, physically, whatever.
You're right.
And so when that happens, when you're confronted with a challenge, your brain's gonna go to survival mode.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, it overuses the instinct, the dominant instinct, and it ignores the other ones. And so you can imagine your partner probably doesn't have the same stacking as you do, even if you share, in the anomalous case that you actually share the same dominant instinct with your partner, the secondary won't be the same. And so you're both going to confront each other or the situation through your dominant instinct as a survival mechanism, which means you're not actually able to communicate. And so that's I think a big part of the challenge that then reveals what's going on in terms of your survival instincts. And can you relax, and can you recognize that there's an underutilized instinct there that can balance out the other two? And that's almost always what the third one does, is it's there to balance, it's there to resource you. So if you're, say, self-pres neglected, and you're gonna burn out, you're gonna gas out, you're gonna get physically exhausted. So it's there to serve you. If you're hunter or sexual repressed, you need to change. There's change that has to come into your life, and you're resisting the change. Maybe a little bit more self-disclosure to the people that are close to you. That's tough for those who don't have that. But that starts to become the problem, the presenting problem to your life. So again, full circle back, look at whatever keeps surfacing in front of you week in and week out. The new challenges, the new difficulties, they're going to activate your type and your dominant instinct. And now you can take a pause, a breath, and ask yourself, am I overdoing? Am I pushing through can I see myself pushing through this instinct as a means to surviving? And now can I relax? And can I listen well to the other instincts present in the family system? If I can, then I can value them. And I believe that you also want to value them inside yourself, even though they're, the third one will be mostly neglected or untapped. It's still, you can hear it. It's a quieter voice. It's the one at the table that doesn't speak much, but you can hear it a little bit. And if you can hear it a little bit, then you can also value it in the others. And we give some language in the book around what's the language of each of the instincts. Because then if you can learn the language, you can start to hear it inside yourself and then hear it in your family as well.
Thank you.
You ask a question, you're like, what do people do if they realize they're stuck or they're feeling stuck? And I want to directly speak to anyone who feels that way, because I have really good news for you. The second you realize you're stuck, you're not. The problem is when people don't realize it, when you're repeating patterns and you don't even notice you're repeating the patterns. The second you step into the awareness of realizing you're stuck, that means you are on your way out. And you can start to see, Joel has this great quote we put in the book, that when you can see yourself being yourself, then you can finally change. So the second the awareness starts to come on your radar, that you are seeing, I don't like where I'm at. Well, it's probably because you're doing things that don't produce what you actually want. And sometimes the hardest realization, especially, I won't speak for everyone, but for me in this journey, is, especially with the instincts, is the areas that I felt the most stuck. I had to admit to myself that my life is functioning exactly as I've designed it to. And so if I want to change it, I need to actually redesign it. And so that means getting out of whatever that blind spot is. You know, if you're low in that teamer social instinct, you do have to start taking the action of participating in something that is bigger than yourself to start feeling different. It doesn't go, we spin, a lot of us in the Enneagram world, we talk about like the head, heart, and body. And I feel like a lot of not the great forms of like therapy or coaching, but the not so great forms, it spins the wheel backward. It tries to think different so it can feel different, so it'll act different. And that's spinning the wheel in the wrong direction. We have to spin it the other way. We have to act different. That makes us feel different. And then we actually think and believe differently. And so if you're low in that teamer instinct, participating in something bigger than yourself starts to spin the wheel in the right direction. If you're low in that hunter instinct and you go, what could be a calculated risk? Who is someone that I could connect with? A person that I could individually connect with, who could help me take this step? Like for me, that farmer instinct, that self-pres instinct was the lowest. And anytime I came up to anything that had to do with that realm, I felt like wearing one of those t-shirts, like I don't feel like adulting today, because that's what it felt like to me. It felt like all this pressure of like needing to be, structured and organized, and it made me feel incompetent and insecure. And I'd start to pull back or shut down or default to others, which is something that can happen in that space. You start to actually not even trust yourself. And then instead of inviting yourself to like, okay, well, what's a way that I can move at the rhythm of this thing? And Joel has some good stuff in the book as far as like there's like a pace that's different with each of the instincts. Like the hunter instinct it's got the highest amount of speed, right? It's moving quickly. And that farmer instinct, it wants to slow things down and be a lot more calculated. And so when I'm doing something that is a farmer task, I have to breathe, slow down, be more thorough, try to take in a broader perspective. And if I need to be in the teamer mode, I'm able to shift between those. Like we talk about, the teamer it's a lot more of the generalist than it is the specialist. And it's comfortable moving between these different realms.
Wow. That's so helpful, because people that are feeling that sticky spot, like you said, that's the encouraging news, is you being aware is really great. And also, as Joel said, like this is a lot of it unconscious lower brain survival pattern. So just you noticing it, taking that breath and pause is a great step. And I love how you're sharing how hard it is internally for you too, Jim, to just put it on. It feels so foreign and awkward. But when you just do it, you see the benefit of it. And sometimes if you overthink it, which I had a client talk about today, they had to just start doing something because overthinking did not provide the resource. All they did was negatively chain forward of what could happen. And that, I also want to say that I think sometimes when I'm in one of those modes, just even a few minutes of it, the dominant instinct can help me to get that courage. Let's say I need the self-preservation instinct because I'm tired, and I just 5 minutes of laying down and doing a quick breath work exercise can then help me to go to the harder instinct. Maybe it's the social.
Really
And
good.
I think that's important for you to realize. I feel that's very clear in your book that you guys talk about how we're not against the dominant instinct, right?
Right. No, it's your gift. It's your light to shine in the world. And the thing that we advocate a ton of is we're not looking to minimize anything. We're not looking to tell you that you're too much of this or you're too little of that. That's not the point of this at all. It's actually to recognize there is something remarkable about who you are. And there is this beautiful light about you.
Yeah.
And it includes, it's not the only part, but it includes your type and your two instincts, your dominant and your secondary. And so when that gets to shine brightly, well, it looks beautiful. But it's the thriving part as opposed to the surviving part. And so that's the reason why we say, look, the third is important in helping you with that. Because when you're in only the first two, you're in a loop. And that oscillation turns into some nasty feedback sounds, and it just goes around and around and around and around, and you burn yourself out on those two. So yeah, the third one really helps you to relax, to recalibrate, to re-energize. It's a resource point. It's entirely designed to do that, so that your dominant instinct can now move into that thriving, where then it respects. It's this respectful so I'm kind of anthropomorphizing this, but it's like you've got your three instincts as three different people, and what you're doing is you're harmonizing all three voices. You're listening well, and there's an interaction between them. And you, who stands outside of that, Gurdjieff's fourth way concept with the centers of intelligence, it's also this: you can stand outside of that and decide, okay, what's the better approach here? What's the better thing I could do here? And that puts you more into that thriving brain. So
thank you guys. Thanks for normalizing it, explaining it so well, and also reminding us that you both said it in different ways, that when we're just tracking with that dominant instinct and maybe that secondary one, that we're living out the exact life that we planned. It's just, if we want to become expansive and do more, which most of us do who are listening to a podcast, you're listening for The Art of Growth, the name of your podcast. You want that. So if you want that, then this is the way. But thankfully, it's a gentle way at times. And there's a forgiving nature to it as well, because we all know how hard it is, how we bumble through it. And that awkwardness, once you're aware of it, can help you to have more grace for both yourself and any partnerships you're in, with work or otherwise. I love that. I've noticed one of the questions I had sent to you guys in the earlier notes I'd sent was about when people are not using their top instincts, and how I've seen that happen a lot of times, especially in the earlier part of life. But interestingly, this week I interviewed somebody who is working in a job, and she didn't know the language of this or instincts, but she did say, I'm working with my least dominant instinct. And that was such a key for me. And now she specializes in it. Can you speak to those people who are feeling like, I found out what my top instinct is, and I'm actually working somewhere else? Do you recommend that? Do you feel like it's to each their own? How do you guys feel about areas where we should be working?
Yeah, well, ideally you want to work somewhere where you get to use your dominant instinct. And the more that you can, the better that is for you, and it's also better for those around you. However, there's some anomalies in this as well. So, for example, if you are gifted or talented, you have a natural talent in a particular area, it may not match up with your dominant instinct. So that has been a surprise for some people. I've met some people who are very good at. There was a gentleman who was an architect that we had hired, and I think his self-preservation was most likely his repressed instinct. But here he is in a field that requires a lot of that kind of way of moving through the world, and the attention of that. When I talked with him, it was fascinating to discover just how much he loved people and the whole reason why. And I asked him, "Why do you do this? What brings you life?" And he said, "Oh, getting to know people and getting into their stories and listening to them, and it just is so rewarding for me." And he spent way too much time with me. He had no concept of like how much time, because I mean,
Wow.
he wasn't charging us.
Yeah.
He spent 2 or 3 hours, and I saw him interacting with his staff, and he had quite a few staff people there, and he's hanging with them and talking with them and interacting with them, and it's like, wow, this is interesting. Someone who is in that role, and I've met many people like this, but they're gifted at something. He was very good, very gifted at being able to, with numbers and with design and all that. That happens, but he managed to figure out a way of getting his dominant instinct needs met through a lot of collaboration, and that's how he did what he did. And he won people over to himself, and he was always busy, always had business, was very successful, but it's because of his winsome personality, and he was very much into the stories of people wanting to make sure they felt supported and seen and all that. So there's a lot to that I think is helpful for people to conceive of, if they have the autonomy to do so, to move more towards that. But there are also plenty of stories of people that we've coached who don't have the autonomy, and their role is really specific, and it requires an instinct that is their third or their repressed instinct. And that's a recipe for burnout. For those people, I say, get a plan and exit as quickly as you can. Save yourself, and look for something where you can do that. You can use your dominant instinct. We coached somebody in burnout who had been promoted because he was so good at what he did. He got promoted to manager. He has no social or teamer instinct. We worked through it. He said, "That is my repressed, and it's not even an interest to him." It's like,
Wow.
and here he is as a manager of a team, and he burned out hard. And so that's my advice. Get out as much, if you can, get out, look for something where you can do that. The other thing too is, figure out hobbies. If you've got extra time, you've got the ability to do that, figure out hobbies where you can use your dominant instinct as well.
That's beautiful.
Sometimes a way to balance out something that may be not as reciprocal. And we describe your dominant instinct has this reciprocal nature to it, where you put work out, you put something out, and the energy comes back. So this is very rewarding kind of experience. And so as much as you can, I would say aim your life in that direction.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's such a good piece of advice, because I do know there's listeners who are not able to just out and out leave their jobs.
Yeah.
And yet you're saying, make sure then you take part in life-giving hobbies.
Yes.
This will be everything to sustain you until you can make a plan. And I also love how you guys flipped the script a little and said, sometimes you can funnel your top instincts into this other one, and you're just gifted in it, and it works out. So I also hear you saying, don't box yourself in. If you are happy in your job and you're hearing this, you don't have to run and change. But thank you for just bringing clarity on that. Now, tell us what everybody can find in your book. We'll do a fun lightning round, but just because I think people are starting to get a sense, but we'd love for you guys to explain why this is a helpful resource for them and their families or their jobs, because it really has been for me.
So there's a couple things I'd say to that. One is, as far as in their jobs and the teams, if you're someone who's responsible for structuring them, you're trying to figure out how people work, this has been a game changer for some. And for example, there was a team leader I was coaching with a Fortune 100 company, and everything had just gone through a reorg. And so a bunch of new people were in. He's trying to figure out where people should go and who should be doing what. And there were projects that were like drawing on and on and on. And when I gave him the structure, within 5 minutes, he said, "I put that person over the wrong project. I gave that to this kind of person. I should have given it to this person." And he made that change that day. He goes, "I lost 4 months of productivity that way." And so sometimes there's like, oh, actually, and nobody was happy. I think that's a huge component too. So it's like you get some of these things structurally right, and people are actually enjoy, because I think one of the biggest things is like someone loves doing the thing that stresses you out.
Mm-hmm.
And you might love doing the thing that stresses someone else out. So why spend so much of your time and energy doing things that stress you out? Like that's a huge part of this. I had an amazing epiphany working with the corporate certification students. So these are our students who have been through Enneagram certification, and they are wanting to learn our program that we take into corporations. And when we were having this discussion about the instincts, they had seen their stack in a certain way. But when we really switched it to like what really makes you feel like you're at your best and you're thriving, several of them changed the way their stacks are actually wired, because they saw it, instead of seeing it just through that survival lens, they were seeing it through that thriving lens. And one thing we've explained is that for a lot of people, when they're under stress and they're living in a stress state, they actually tend to live more out of that secondary instinct.
Interesting.
Because it's like it's not quite as close to the heart, quite as close to who you are. And so they can really overly identify with their secondary instinct, and it's not actually where they feel at their best. And the goal is that we're at our best, and we're allowing other people to be at their best. Because like I said, there's so many times where I've taken things on, or I've been insecure and I felt like I had to do certain things that someone else would have loved if I would have turned it over to them. But I was like, well, this is a really burdensome task, so I don't want to put this on someone else. And then someone else is like, that's not burdensome at all. That's easy. It's kind of fun. I'm like, wait, what? Because if I didn't understand the instincts, I wouldn't understand that people are actually wired that way, because we interpret things through our own lens. So I saw a task as being horrible. So I didn't want to put, give it to someone else to make them do this horrible task. And they're like, actually, there's no problem doing that task at all. So like actually respecting the gifts of others.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. It's courage, but once you step into it, it's such a gift to you both, because the other people get to do that beautiful thing they were made to do. And that's what your book is helping people do, is step into your best spots. Here's some ways to not miss your better, bigger things you want for your life, but also to let other people take over large portions of those things, so that you're not just demanding you be perfect in every center, 33.333 in each one.
No.
I love it, you guys. This is great. I love how you brought yourselves together to reduce the errors of the fundamental attribution errors of thinking we're right, everyone else is wrong. You guys have put so much beauty and boldness into this, and I appreciate that. We need fresh language for understanding. We're going to always be evolving. Tell us a little bit more, just for fun, if you have a couple more minutes. Do you guys have a moment?
No rush.
Okay, cool. So we'll do a quick lightning round and then find out where everyone can find your book. But just to humanize a bit, in each of your self-pres instincts, what's your go-to stress relief activity?
In self-pres stuff, farmer instinct?
Farmer.
I get a bunch.
Yeah. I mean, my favorite is long bike rides. There's something about the clarity of that space, or surfing, but it's just like kind of being out, being by myself, being having, no stimulation other than nature and environment, and just moving my body. That is the pinnacle of like refreshment in my book.
And it works for you so to serve your dominant instinct, which is what you've noticed, because you've said, oh my gosh, you get these ideas that hit you when you're on a long bike ride.
Yep.
And you've got, I know what we can do now for the greater good of the whole. And it's pretty awesome. Yeah, mine was, I've got a few that are not refreshing, because they just, they activate more of the sexual and hunter instinct, the overstimulation. So I'll leave those out. The ones that are the most, a lot of it is even how I engage it. That's been a learning lesson for me. It's like, I can ruin any good thing
Yeah.
with overdoing it with the instinct. So it's like, okay, what can I do that is more, I breathe, I'm engaging in it in a more participatory way. So I play a lot of racquetball, and that's a definite wonderful outlet. But I notice that when I really feel good, it's when I've gone into there without as much as the competition, because there's the hunter instincts. I mean, all you hunters out there, all you sexual types, you know how competitive we are. And just going in there with like, pull back on the competition. You're here, enter into it more self-pres. And when I do that, because it is my repressed instinct, when I move with that instinct, which is a different rhythm, it's a different pace. So slow down, it's methodical, it's easy, it's lighter. When I do that, then I come back and I feel refreshed. Oh, this was a great experience. So yeah.
Beautiful. Yes, you bring moderation to it. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's so welcoming for, I'm sure, a lot of people who are like, that's a repressed one for me. I needed that. Okay, with you guys. Okay, what about the hunter or sexual instinct? What project or idea or creative element is currently energizing you the most?
Jeez. So many things.
Yes, maybe just one of them versus this hierarchy
This
pressure.
is all you, man. I'll just let you do that one.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's there's always a hunt. There's always something, ooh, that's interesting. I should pursue that.
Yeah.
So I've been doing a lot of to all of you who are IFS lovers, internal family system lovers.
Yeah.
I have fallen head over heels in love with it, plus cognitive science and everything that has to do with the inner workings. And so I've been doing a lot of listening to that, practicing with it on myself, and starting to use it with some clients. And I find that it just is such a perfect match to the Enneagram, because we're already interacting with the different parts of us. You know, I even have my clients talk to their different centers. So like, hey, talk to the 2 inside you, or talk to the 5 inside you, or the 8 inside you. You know, and we have this harmonic that we use where it's like the 7 drops down to the 4 in the heart center and drops down to the 1 in the body center. And so talk to the 4 inside you. And how would it view this issue that you have in front of you? How would it engage with it? How about the 1 inside you? And so that has been something I have really, really enjoyed getting into. And so, yeah, I mean, that's what comes to mind right now. There's always something, buzzing about. So it's good to have Jim around, because he can kind of sometimes go, okay, this is what we're looking at. This is what we're working on today.
Yeah. So good. And I know a lot of people within that hunter instinct are going, okay, now I've got to learn more about that too. Like, your passion is seen and validated, and then thankful, like you said, for Jim as well. Okay. So Jim, then the social or the teamer, describe your ideal team dynamic in a few words, just something that you're like, this makes me feel like we're all in the healthiest of circles and we're able to step outside of the circle. And yeah.
It's a huge thing to me that everyone is making a contribution. So like anytime I've done like even a group coaching or whatever, it's like I want to hear from everyone. Like, find your voice, speak for yourself. Everyone bring your puzzle piece to the table, because that's the only way we're going to make something beautiful. I don't like when, in any kind of environment, I don't like is when someone dominates, or they take over, or they're taking up all the room, or they're trying to push other people around. There's also that 8 part of me that doesn't like anyone trying to control a particular what's going on. It's the ideal space is everyone gets to play, everyone gets to contribute. And it's funny, Joel's talking about racquetball, not bringing too much hunter into it. Like, I do jujitsu, so it's a combat sport, and it's 2 people who are like literally physically trying to dominate and control the other person. But to me, it's not fun unless it has a playful, like, everyone's trying to make each other better atmosphere. Like, I don't like it to be a very competitive environment. It should be a camaraderie thing, because if I can beat you every time and I just do the same thing, you're not getting better, I'm not getting better, we're not really playing. So like, in a highly, even an environment that seems like it's really difficult or intense or whatever, I want to play. I like sing and make jokes and like make weird comments and stuff like that when I'm sparring or rolling with people, because to me, there should be an element of play in all of it.
Yeah.
If everyone's playing, everyone's contributing, that's just dang good stuff to me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And you're casting the vision well. And I think of that social instinct as so thoughtful and kind towards others. And yet, of course, we all know we need that hunter instinct to also have an idea to spread out. And we need that self-pres instinct to get the rest we need, or that farmer instinct to plant and to be able to allow things to saturate and to have margin so that we could do all of this. This is great, you guys. Tell us where we can find your book, and for those who haven't yet heard your pod, for how they can find you there too.
Yeah. So the Art of Growth podcast, you can find that anywhere. And then for people who are newer to the Enneagram, sometimes I point them to our type specific podcast. So something we did last year is, if you just look up like Enneagram Type 1, you can go and listen to all the Type 1 panels or all the Type 2. They're on their own separate podcasts. The main podcast and where we're talking about all of this right now is on the Art of Growth podcast. And then the book itself, you can find it through Amazon. The Audible version should be out within the next week or so. That's already finished. And so we have it in hardback, and we got it in paperback. We have it on Kindle, and the audiobook will be out soon. So whatever format you like to enjoy, you can get to that. And then our Instagram is just Art of Growth. So there's a bunch of extra videos and stuff that we've been talking about, even through some of the conversations we've had since the book came out, ideas that we've expanded on. So, and then done videos on or done some slides on or whatever. So yeah, we're easy to find, but I would really recommend, as a first step, is for people to go take the assessment at theartofgrowth.org and take the Hunter Farmer Teamer or the Instinct assessment. So it's under a part called Discover Your Type. So how a lot of people initially found us was through our Enneagram test. But the Instincts test is right there as well. And even a youth Enneagram test for people who are younger. So
oh my God,
all of that is in process.
Fantastic, guys. You are doing so much so well and in as balanced a way as possible. Thank you so much for your time today.
Trying.
So great.
Oh, it's so great. Thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it. It's really an honor to feel like we're contributing to the conversation, because so many people have done such great work that contributed to our lives. And now I feel like this is, again, the teameristic, like we're all contributing to this space together now. And that's really a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you guys doing that. I agree with that wholeheartedly. So let's keep it up. Oh my goodness, that was so helpful. And like I said, I wanted to reflect on something as we come back, because I am doing my marriage minute at the end this time, but really I was reflecting on something tough that came up in our families. A lot of you know, sometimes I'll have an extended family issue where people pop in, and you know this about Florida, like people just pop in and they're like, here I am on spring break, etc., like at all different crazy times. And I think my self-pres really kicks in here. And the way that Joel and Jim talk about how sometimes our first instinct folds into our second instinct. Yes, that happens to me with my self-present sexual instinct. I'll be like, oh yeah, like I want to just sit and read and learn and like do our own thing, but I want to do that together, right? So those are my first two instincts. And then when these kinds of things happen, I notice that I also want to do the negative of those experiences, where I'm like, okay, my self-pres is threatened. I'm going to come at you one-to-one. This is war. And I'm like, don't do that, Kristen. Don't do that to anyone. Don't do that to Wes. Don't do that to anyone. And I just breathe through it. And I just really appreciated this chance, this opportunity to allow myself some countenance. By the time I actually got to Wes and was just like, I need to hold presence. I need to be thoughtful. I need to be social with all this. I had some ideas rolling around, which they said, hey, just getting the ideas is such a great thing. And then by the time I was even ready to think about speaking them out. It was so gentle and lighthearted and better than anything I could have tried to arrange within and it was just beautiful. So I want to invite you now to think about a situation or time, whether you're in a positive space or a little bit of a tougher spot. What is one way you can use these beautiful tools from this episode?
So thank you for joining us. Coming up next, we are going to be going into a wisdom series podcast. We've been talking about it for months, and we are so excited. And we are also excited that this will be the launch of our podcast being available on YouTube. And this series in particular will be on YouTube. You can follow us on Instagram at just Art of Growth and sign up for our newsletter at theartofgrowth.org, which is also the place to reach out to us if you'd like us to train your team and coach your executives to ensure you get your strategic initiatives across the goal line. And if you are in Massachusetts, we are part of a grant where the state will pay for your company to be trained by us. And if you'd like to be certified in the Enneagram, you can do that through us. We are an official IEA accredited school, and we now have a self-paced program where you can do it at your own pace. And it's a little more hands-on with a personal touch from us. So we are always appreciative that you join us. And until next time, my friends, grace and growth.